Good morning or good afternoon, year 5, depending on when you're watching this video. So let's see what Mrs. Sanders says to the gang. Well, she said, leaning back in her chair, I hardly know what to say. She leaned forward and picked up my exercise book with the greatest idea in the world, drawn in it. But what can I say? Is that Emmett? Is very, very lucky to have friends who are so passionate about helping him find his family. Mrs. Khan nodded, and I saw the two police officers nodding too. Now, just to be clear, said Mrs. Sanders, peering over her glasses at us, what you did was extremely dangerous, and your plan, or the likes of it, must never, ever be attempted again. Do you understand? We all nodded silently. I could feel my cheeks getting hot, and I saw Tom's ears instantly turn bright red. You lied to Mrs. Khan, you left school without permission, and you put yourselves in great danger. Behaviour like this would usually lead to a temporary suspension from school. Josie gasped and Michael winced. I could hear Tom swallowing nervously, and even Emmett looked scared. Mrs. Sanders went on. However, we've spoken with all your parents, and I can understand fully that you thought this was an emergency. So, I looked up at Mrs. Sanders and could feel everyone doing the same thing. In this instance, you will not be suspended. Tom yelped a small, yes, and Josie let out a huge puff of air that had been making her cheeks swell. And Michael gave a long sigh, and as soon as Mrs. Hemsey had told him what had happened, Emmett cheered and clapped. But even though I felt happy too, I couldn't feel fully happy because I still wanted to know something. What about Emmett's family, miss? Has the Queen found them already? Mrs. Sanders shook her head and slowly leaned forward. I think you should all know that the Queen, well, there are some things that even she can't do. But she's the Queen, frowned Tom. She can do whatever she wants. I could see Emmett staring at Mrs. Sanders, as if she wasn't making sense either. But Mrs. Sanders was shaking her head. I'm afraid that's not quite true. I'm sure that the Queen would like to try and help Emmett in some way, but I doubt very much that she'll be allowed to send out extra people to find his family, especially when no one knows where they are. On hearing Mrs. Sanders' words, I felt something hard hit me in the middle of my chest. I wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that the Queen could help anyone if she wanted to, but even though my mouth opened, it couldn't say any words. I know that this may come as a huge disappointment, said Mrs. Sanders, peering over her glasses at us, and looking at me the longest. But Emmett had lots of people trying to help find his family. Even though, if they do find them, it may take a lot longer, months, maybe even years, before they can join him here. That's why he's staying with Mrs. York for now, she added, nodding at Emmett's foster mum. We all stayed silent, and even though I didn't want them to, I could feel my eyes beginning to get wet and my nose tickling and something heavy sinking in the pit of my stomach. Everything we had done had been for nothing. And the greatest idea in the world was really the stupidest idea in the world. In fact, it was probably the stupidest idea in the whole universe, and I knew that everyone was thinking it too. Now, said Mrs. Sanders kindly, I want to show you something. She took out a newspaper from out of her bag and laid it on the desk in front of us. I looked over at Michael and Tom and Josie, but I think they must have all forgotten about the promise we made, because they immediately started to read the paper. So I wiped my eyes and looked at it too. I knew that it had to be okay to break a promise to your mum, if your head teacher was telling you to. A huge headline stared up at us from the front page, and alongside it was a large blurry image of me running up to one of the Queen's guards with Tom behind me. I could tell it was me because of my bright blue rucksack, but I couldn't see my face properly at all. The paper looked like this. Here you go, year 5. The headline on the paper is Who is Emmett and How Can We Help? The story said that the newspaper was going to run an international appeal to find Emmett's parents, which made Josie grin and whisper, see, this is what it said. So year 5, we're going to leave it there. Ooh, we'll see what the newspaper says tomorrow, and we'll see if if he's going to find his family. Maybe the newspaper is going to be the one that helps after all. Over and out, Miss Davis.